Hey everybody, I'm Nick Von Walkerbarth and you're listening to the Von Dubcast. I like to do a little bit of intro where I talk about what's happening in my life, a little bit of background on the guest, what I felt going into the interview, what I thought of the interview, and just whatever else is going on. If you'd like to jump right to the interview, you can skip to 15 minutes. If not, we have one sponsor and we'll get right into it. Today's episode is brought to you by Freshie in Grand Prairie. Freshie is it's kind of like a mixture between fast food and health food. It's quick, it's easy, and you get delicious, healthy food. It's a pillar in my journey to try and be healthy. It's usually sometimes the only thing I do that's healthy in a day, but it's always there for me and I really enjoy it. If you're ever in GP, please stop by and check them out. Hey everybody, welcome to episode 117 of the Von Dubcast. Got a really special one for you guys today. I'm really excited about it. I know I say that a lot, but not often you get to talk to somebody that ran the complete distance of Canada. And not only that, but doing it for such an amazing reason, and to not stop there and to just have that be the beginning and wanting to do so much more than that, and to fully believe that person when they say it. You know, I think if somebody was to tell me some of the goals that we discuss on this podcast for what Skylar wants to do in the future, I'd look at them with maybe a bit of skepticism, but I believed every word he said. And I think that's really inspirational. And I think a big reason for that is the why. And you'll hear on this podcast, we talk a lot about mental health, and Skylar actually lost two of his friends to mental health growing up and has struggled himself. And, you know, you guys should know by now, I talk about it all the time, my struggles with mental health, and especially as of late. And I didn't realize how much I needed this conversation until we had it, and just to see how similar, not even just say me and Skylar, but just how similar humans are in general, and just to hear somebody's story and to hear someone be very open and vulnerable, and just that feeling of, oh, I'm not alone. More people feel this, and how even though I have a podcast where I talk about this all the time, it still is tough to keep that at the forefront of your mind. And I think with what everybody's going through right now, that's a very easy thing. It's something we got to keep in mind. And so we talked about, you know, the run itself, a lot about mental health. Tells a crazy story about a cougar encounter that he had that just will leave you with chills. I think Skylar is a really, really impressive human being and a really inspirational human being. I can't wait to see what he's going to do in the future. So I hope you guys really enjoy this episode. If you do, please pass it on to a friend. You know, maybe you got a friend that really likes running, or is really into mental health, and maybe you think could use this episode. Please pass it on to them. Please subscribe to the Von Dubcast on whatever app you listen to it on. That always really helps. Set it to download automatically, if you will. Then no matter what situation you get into, maybe it's your car breaks down on the side of the road and you got to wait for a couple hours for a tow truck. Hey, you got a podcast already downloaded and loaded up. That'd be awesome. Following social media and following Skylar's social media, it's Skylar Roth-Mac, SkylarRothmac, and then Miles for Smiles Canada. I'm not going to spell that one out. You guys can figure that out on your own. That's kind of his run page, and then that's his personal page, and they'll both be linked below, as well as I'm going to try and find a mental health number that I can link, because sometimes we talk a lot in this podcast about tools that I use and that Skylar uses, and I always love to ask people about when mental health comes up, what are your tools? What do you use? Because it's always an evolving thing, and you're always going to need new tools, and something that works for you today might not be adequate for tomorrow, and you always should be keeping your eye open for new things. And where was I going? Where was I going with that? The tools, asking about them, whatever it was. I don't even know. That happens to me all the time, but you guys know that by now. You've been listening to this podcast long enough. You know I lose my train of thoughts. Blame the weed, baby. Blame the weed. It was just a really special conversation, and I think it's awesome for people to hear that it's okay to ask for help. And Skylar talks about in this podcast, of a bit about the taboo and the fear of reaching out for help and asking for it. And sometimes that can be a friend. Sometimes it needs to be more than that. Sometimes you need to take a bigger step, and that's going to be different for everybody. But the most important thing is to just keep taking those steps and keep asking, whether that's just being brave enough to tell your friend that you're not doing okay, or if that's, calling a mental health line and taking that step. There's all sorts of things you can do. And the most important thing is just to keep taking steps, one foot in front of the other. It sounds cliche, but that's the biggest thing at the end of the day. you're always wanted, you're always worth something. Life is beautiful and you never want to get to that point. And I'm so thankful for this. And I feel like that's why I struggle often to talk about it, because no matter how low I get, and that can be very low. And I think I've, talked about it on this podcast and on many podcasts about my mental health and depression and how awful that can be. But at any point, I always have that underpinning of life is beautiful and amazing. And just to be here, I always have that. And I never lose that. And for that reason, I've never gotten to that point where suicide has ever crossed my mind. I've never even thought about it. It's not, and I'm so thankful for that. And I think for that reason, no matter how horrible I'm doing, I know that I've never gotten to that point now. And I hope I will never know what it is to get to that point. But if you do, just know that there are people out there that are feeling similar things, and that your mind can play tricks on you, and thoughts are just thoughts. And that's what I love so much about meditation. Nothing for me has really driven that home, that thoughts are just thoughts, like meditation, when you can just see those thoughts for what they are and that they just come and go, and you have to see if it serves you and find a way to stop those thoughts. And I really struggle with those a lot for myself, is just self-defeating and very maybe unkind thoughts to myself, and not leaving enough compassion. And I talk all the time about compassion for others, and I think that's something I do a lot better at, finding compassion for others, even those that I disagree with, than I do to find compassion for myself at times, and not just beating yourself up. And I think that's lots of people. And it's just about, does that serve you, and trying to find tools that you can do to stop that cycle and stop yourself from, maybe picking on yourself and just getting into that loop where, you can't do better because you're so busy beating yourself up, and then you're not doing what you want to do. So then that's more excuses or more, ammunition for your mind to go crazy and to pile on. I just know that cycle very well. And like I said, even though I've never gotten to that point, and I'm so thankful for that, everyone handles these things differently. And I just want to try my best through these conversations to put myself into people's shoes, and try to just have that compassion for them, and to see what it is, and to hopefully allow that safe, vulnerable space for people to talk about that have experienced that. And I think that's what was so amazing about Skylar. There's many amazing things about Skylar. Fuck, the guy ran across Canada, for goddamn sakes. But even more so than that, just his vulnerability to talk about his own journey and what he's been through. Like, I just admire that so much. And this has always come very natural to me, to be open and to talk about this kind of thing. I think I always really rebelled against that, and I hated, growing up. I think a lot of times our family kind of thought, we're very concerned about what other people thought, and keeping up appearances and stuff. And I always hated that, because I always, from the time I can remember, I always thought that was silly, and I would love to just be open about things, but I was taught that that's not how you do it. And now I'm kind of breaking that barrier back down, and I understand that, to go on and be open about what I'm feeling and talk about it. I'm a podcaster at heart. I think you guys know that, and I can very easily bring these things up and talk about them. And it doesn't, it's not that hard for me, but for others, I know that that's not true, and they don't get that to practice it on a, maybe not a daily basis, but a weekly basis, where I get to sit down and practice that like a skill. For someone like Skylar just to come on and step right into that role and do it so beautifully and speak so eloquently about what it is, I just thought that was awesome. And it really fueled me up and inspired me to get my ass off the couch and kind of, stop some of those thought patterns and really kick some ass. And on top of that, I have some really, really exciting news that is just firing up. I can't tell you guys just yet. It'll be probably another 2 weeks before I can tell you, you'll very much understand why once I do tell you, why I can't tell you right now. But I am so goddamn excited for it. And it came at such a time, and it was just such a sign from the universe of just when I was at my worst, when I was feeling more depressed and more lost and more lonely than I have in a really long time. This idea and this thing I'm really excited about kind of fell into my lap. A friend brought the idea up, and I just jumped at it. And, we were so excited to talk about it. And I even told him, and me and him usually don't talk about certain things like this very often, but just, like, hey man, like, I really needed that. And I know that this is an exciting idea on top of that. And even if I didn't really need it, this is just such a cool thing. I'm really excited for it, but man, did I need this. And I just couldn't be more excited about it. So couple more weeks and I'll be able to let you guys know what it is I have cooking, and you guys will be able to follow along in a really fun way, I hope. And I guess this is just one more plug to follow the Von Dubcast Instagram, because you're really going to want to watch and follow along with that. Oh, and another thing is, we talked about it on this podcast, animals and dogs, and Skylar had when he got a dog at 18, he just described really well all the impacts that it had, and it kind of dovetails nicely with I just got my dog back. My ex had her in Winnipeg for the holidays, and that was great. I was so happy that she got to have a really nice time with her family and the dog. But now the dog is back with me. I gave her a nice bath last night and a good brushing, and she's all cute and fluffy, and we've just been snuggling lots. She's just in her first heat right now, so she's a little uncomfortable, and just trying to keep an eye on her. I was so worried for this podcast that she was going to be a menace and just barking and whining, because she's been a little bit sucky, and I don't blame her. She's going through some stuff right now, my poor little love. But she was so good and didn't make a peep. And hopefully when the video for this podcast comes out, you'll get to see her. She made a little appearance, poked her nose up onto the camera for a bit, and then sat in her bed for a little bit on the camera and behind, and just was such a good girl. And I'm so proud of her, and I'm so happy to have her back. And I think for my mental health, it is very nice to get that to get that source. And I know that's not for everybody, but goddamn, how do we deserve these animals that we got? Whether it's kittens or dogs, whatever your thing is, we don't deserve them. They're just so cute and so good. And hopefully you can't hear her just chewing away on her bully stick over in the corner right now. Other than that, I don't know what else. Nice to have this. How am I going to explain this to you guys? This is the first time in a long time that I've hopped on here and been happy. Like, I'm excited to record this, and that is a feeling that I haven't had in a while. I feel like I've been so down, and I was just so disappointed and beating myself up for, okay, here's another episode release. I haven't moved forward at all. I'm in the same spot, kind of those negative thoughts like I talked about, and being embarrassed with how I'm feeling, and be embarrassed that I'm struggling so hard with depression and this stuff. Like I'm ashamed of it a lot, and which is silly. I know that, and I'm trying to work on it. And if you're thinking that, you're probably sitting in your car right now, listening, being like, you effing idiot. Like, you know what I mean? And sure, from the outside, and that's great. And that's why I want to be open about it, so you can see how silly it is, so that when you slip into those patterns yourself, because it's always easier to see the silliness of it in somebody else. But when it's you, for some reason, it's really hard to see it. So the more people that can talk about it, the more the taboo kind of falls to the side, the better we're all going to be. And all that jazz. So yeah, got this episode, which is really spicy. Really enjoyed it. Got a great one with Danique Alley, who's been on before. Very spiritual conversation. Very much. I'm trying to even find the right words for it. Very much out of the realm of science and logic, and into the more of the spiritual and foundational. That's not the right word. I don't know. I don't know what to call it. But if you listen to the first episode, you'll know exactly what you're in for. And it was just another really fun one. Got that one coming up for you guys probably next week. Driving down to Calgary tomorrow to interview a really, really special gentleman that I think is going to be really exciting for you guys. And it's going to be a little bit of a drive, but I'm excited for it. I'm passionate again. I feel like just these last couple episodes and getting this rolling, and then that unspecified thing that you guys will hear about in the future is just all what I really needed to kind of kick me into gear and get me shaken out. Not to mention, I shouldn't put it all on the feet of that. I also, started forcing myself to a good bedtime. I've been working out every day. I've been eating a bit healthier. I've really cracked down on a lot of that, and that always goes a million miles for helping my mental health. And then meditation, just trying to work that in. I don't know why. I enjoy it so much when I do. I don't know why I get so lazy and then stop doing it, but just had a great meditation before recording this intro, and it made me feel really good. And I know I just got to remember that feeling. Hey, dum-dum, remember how good it makes you feel when you meditate? Why don't you meditate, dumbass? Yeah, that's where I'm at. So hopefully you guys get something from this conversation. I hope you enjoy it. I hope you go follow Skylar. He's a really interesting human being. I think he's going to be an interesting person to follow for many, many years to come. And he's got a great message, great head on his shoulders. Good old Alberta boy too. That always puts a little tear in my eye, seeing a good old Alberta boy do something courageous and awesome. Other than that, like I always say, tell those that you love them, even if it's a guy. It doesn't matter. You can do it. Even if it's your friend. I tell my friends I love them all the time. And have a great week, and I will see you on the outro. Bye. Beautiful. Thanks for being here, Skylar. It's a long time coming. I'm glad we finally got to make this happen.
Hey, thank you for having me. I'm super, super excited.
Yeah. And as the listeners already know, because I mentioned in the intro, just what a crazy feat that is that you accomplished. I'm curious kind of to start off. I know I'd heard you on a couple other podcasts say that this is a dream you've had for a long time. So when did this idea of running across Canada first kind of percolate in your head?
Like elementary school, I just remember doing like that Terry Fox run in elementary school and just being completely mind blown that anyone, let alone someone who's, with one leg and has battled cancer and, just for anyone to go from the Pacific Ocean to the Atlantic or the Atlantic to the Pacific, like it was just mind blowing. And I always knew I wanted to do it. But the actual committing to the plan was the fall of 2020. So I think October 2020 was when I committed to it. That's when I started all the planning. And then the run started June 1st, 2021. So it was a quick, I had to plan super quick, honestly. Yeah. It was like 6 or 7 months. That might seem like a lot to some people, but it's really not.
Yeah, especially with all that goes into it. I was lucky enough to have another ultra runner on the podcast in the past. Phil Troyer is from Grand Prairie, and he did a 200 miler that he set up himself for raising money for the Odyssey House in Grand Prairie, which has a shelter for women and families that need it, and a really great cause. And one of the things that blew me away was how much goes into like logistics and planning a run like that. And I mean, that was centralized to kind of the area, and he had the death race course that he could kind of use as a springboard to plan out the different routes. But to go right across Canada, the logistics must have been wild. Did you have a lot of people that kind of helped you out with planning that out, or was a lot of that kind of on your shoulders as well?
Well, first of all, I didn't do any 200-mile days, so that's crazy.
No shit.
In my life. So, the logistics and the planning before the run took off, like I planned the route and like the amount of like kilometers we do that day and where we'd be staying. That was all on my own. Then there was like the financial support to like actually get it going. Like that's super expensive to run across Canada.
Yeah.
So, like I had phenomenal support, not just across Canada, but, around the world that helped me out with the GoFundMe, which is, I'm so grateful for. And to have, sponsors on board too, to help make sure I have like the right gear, hotels to stay in the odd nights. And it was the longer it kind of went along the run, the more support came through. So just that up until the run, it was mostly myself and a few other people, and then as soon as the run started, everyone kind of wanted to get on board, which was amazing.
Oh, that's awesome. What I'm curious, what surprised you the most of, because I'm gonna go out on a limb and say you haven't. I'm gonna guess you haven't planned something out like this before. What surprised you the most, to kind of in prepping for it, of what you maybe wouldn't have thought would be such a big hurdle to plan for? Like, because I'm sure you went into it pretty blind on what it was going to be and just kind of had to jump in with both feet.
Yeah, the hardest part was the pandemic, like the logistics.
Right. And I heard you mention on the other podcast I listened to you on that you planned hoping that kind of COVID would settle as you went east, and that's what made you decide to start from the West Coast and go east. And then I imagine that was probably a really good decision with kind of terrain. And I heard you talking about like the elevation gain that you were hitting in BC, and maybe you could just touch on that, because that blew me away of like what kind of elevation you were doing in a day and shit. Like, oh, that blows my mind.
Yeah, I'm happy I started out west.
Yeah.
First of all, I mean, it was being from Alberta. It's quicker to just go out west, because we had to drive the RV that we were renting. We had to drive that out to Victoria. When I started, BC technically wasn't open, so campgrounds weren't open, gyms, nothing was open. So I actually didn't even shower for the first 9 days. Like,
oh man,
I think I clocked like 800 kilometers with it before having a shower.
Wow.
So,
that might be a record.
It was pretty gross. And then, the elevation, like you'd mentioned, I'm happy I got to take that down early, because that would have been tough in the fourth month.
Exactly.
I think the most elevation we did in a day was 1,800 meters. So just short. I think it'd be like, between 5,000 and 6,000 feet of elevation gain. But being from Alberta and having the Rockies right on our doorstep, that was a massive, I think it's a massive privilege to have those. For because, if you're from Regina, Saskatchewan, your options are kind of like the Stairmaster, running the same small hill hundreds of times.
Right.
Whereas you can just go walk up a beautiful mountain, and by the time you get back to your car, you had such a great day. And then you realize it's like, oh, I climbed 400 sets of stairs today. That's cool.
Yeah.
So that's a huge benefit being from the Rockies. But that was a lot of hills every single day. But BC was awesome. We didn't have any rest days in BC. I think we got across BC in 17 or 18 days.
Wow.
And so I knew once we got through BC with no rest days, and feeling really, really good, that's when I knew that we had it in the bag.
Mm-hmm. And I'm curious to ask about that. Like, that was one of my questions of when did you know you had it? And I'm curious at what points, like, was there ever like I'm sure there was low points. There's always low points and high points in a journey like that. But was there times where you were questioning that, or did you have a lot of confidence the whole time that you were going to make it happen? You come hell or high water, whatever you had to put into it, you were going to get it done.
Yeah, I mean, I was confident, but I wasn't overconfident. I did a trial test last January 24th. I did a 100-mile run in minus 25 degrees Celsius. And so knowing that, okay, if I did 160 kilometers in a day in minus 25, I can easily do 60 kilometers in a day in, weather that's above 0 degrees. Right. So overcoming that eliminated those huge roadblocks. And then also the whole reason why I was running, for mental health. I'd lost friends to suicide, and seeing like what that does to loved ones and family members and
a
friends,
community.
And to know, like, I lost my friend Josh when we were 12 years old. I lost Eli. He had just turned 17 years old. And to know that young men or young people are carrying that much hurt and pain to the point where they have to take their life. Like I can do 60 kilometers with a little blister or a little cramp. It's nothing close to the battle that they were doing. So combining that with that 100-mile run, that's kind of like when I did that 100-mile run, that's kind of when I was like, this is going to be a really fun run across Canada. I know I can do it.
Oh, that's awesome. And that's something that comes up a lot on this podcast is your why and why you're doing something. And that is almost more important than so many other factors. If you have a really strong why of why you're doing something, you can accomplish a lot more than anybody can accomplish, more than what they think they have within themselves. And I think that's such a great message. And as well, just kind of touching on, mental health affects everybody, but specifically men, and just how unfortunately limited we are in the tools that we're taught. And I think that's getting a lot better, and the tide is changing, but it needs to change faster. And we need to teach these tools to our young men, so that as they grow up, they know that, anger and bottling it up is not the only responses that you can have to certain feelings that you're feeling. And that is such a great message. And, I try with this podcast to say that all the time. And I'm a very, very emotional guy and very, soft. And I cry at beautiful things. And I try to spread that message that that's okay. And like to feel those feelings is great. And I think that's, what's going to really make that tide turn, for that message to start getting across and to sink in with these guys all across Canada, across the world. And when I was listening to you talk about that on that last podcast, I was just so fired up and inspired by that, of just having such a strong why. I think when you see people that have that, it's infectious, and I love to hear it. And I just thought that was a great reason. I feel like almost the reasoning behind the run was more impressive than that crazy feat that you accomplished. And I think that's pretty crazy to say, considering you ran across Canada, for gosh damn sakes, like that is that's just awesome. So not to pump your tires too much this early into it, but I just thought that was amazing what you did. I'm curious. So you said you did a 100-mile race as kind of a prep thing. That was a big one that told you, you did some cold weather. It sounds like you did some elevation runs. Was there any other type of, specific type of trainings that you did before to try and practice for it? Maybe some running in the dark, running, in some heat, that type of thing. Did you experiment with that stuff, or is that kind of just
with your base of running already, you kind of knew you had that in the bag?
That's a good question. I think in a way, like I've kind of prepared for this like my whole life without intentionally training for it.
Right.
You know, loving the mountains, loving trail running.
Yeah.
You know, the Rockies have some the craziest terrain in the world. And when you're out on an exposed ridge or on an exposed mountain for, you know, 10 hours a day, like in that sun beating down on you and you're carrying 20 plus pounds, that sure helps. In terms of the cold, like that 100-mile run, I did the David Goggins, that 4x4,
yeah,
where you run 6.5 kilometers every 4 hours, 48 hours. And so, you know, you have to get out of bed at 2 a.m. You know, I purposely did that to do like the most difficult, what I thought were the most difficult hours to train the mind. And coming out of that, like I thought that was, considering it came from David Goggins, I expected it to be like insane, but it's really doable. And I think anyone should do that. It's a great, sure, you have to run a lot, but also it makes your mind stronger than your body. So that was good. So doing little things like that. Getting out on runs. Like my car broke down August 2020. And so my job that I worked at, it was 7 kilometers away one way. So from August until I ended my job in March of 2021, I ran that 14 kilometers every single day, rain, snow, sunshine, whatever. And we all know what it's like to, sometimes you're not doing a job you necessarily like, you know, laying in bed in the morning, dreading to get yourself out of bed. And then knowing that I have to go and run 7 kilometers to get to this job that I don't like.
Yeah.
That made the Canada run very enjoyable because every step of the way along the Canada run was pretty much unknown territory for me. So I think the more you make training suck, the easier that race or the Canada run wasn't a race, but it made the Canada run so much easier.
Yeah. And I think that's applicable to so many things, like besides running, of just, you know, training harder. You hear I'm a big MMA guy, and I always hear that, you know, like if the rounds in the gym are harder than you ever see, then when you get to the fight, it's easy. Right. And you hear that in all these domains. Right. And I think that's a great lesson for people to take in. And I'm curious to hear you talk about the mental side of it, because I think for the uninitiated like myself, the big thing that scares us is the physical side of like, oh, I can't imagine ever putting my body through something like that. But from what I've heard from Phil, who I had on the podcast before, and a little bit from you on that other podcast, was the mental side of it. How aware were you of the difficulties in kind of that mix between the physical and the mental? Going into it, did you think it was going to be kind of 50-50? And then once you did it, where would you put that mix of where the pressure was? Was it harder mentally or physically? Was it kind of 90 physical, 10 mental, 90 mental, 10 physical kind of thing? Or what did you think?
Mental 100%. There was maybe two days on the Canada run where like, I was like, oh, I kind of want to rest day to day.
Yeah.
Like I was ready for it. I wanted to start it earlier than June 1st, but like I was saying, due to the pandemic, I had to start a little late, and I knew that, and that put pressure on me because I had to be done the run before winter came.
Right.
Ideally, because, you know, I'm not really worried about running in winter, but like driving that 34-foot RV on highways and having to stop and find places, it just would have been a disaster. So I felt that pressure from the start, and then just, the logistics, like how the RV would be breaking down. So like getting it in to see a mechanic when I'm supposed to be running, you know, like all that stuff was brutal. So that when you actually get back onto the road, you can blow a huge sigh of relief. You're like, oh, finally, like I can run again. So the running was the best. If I was running, like I was happy.
Right.
So it was all mental.
And that was something that really surprised me, because I think from listening to all of the ultra runners that do these big events, most of the time they have such a crazy support system behind them that usually once they start running, they don't have to think about anything but that, and none of the logistics is all handled around them. And to hear you talk about it, where you're booking in mechanics, you're finding new drivers, you're you know, solving problems also while taking on this huge feat and keeping your mental in the zone to do what you need to do, that blew me away. And I'm curious, is that something that you thought about before? Like, was that just a necessity of that you had to do those things because, you know, if you weren't going to do them, no one else was? Or if maybe a better way to ask this question would be, in hindsight, after doing it, would you change anything on the logistics side from what you learned in doing it, how you did?
Yeah, I mean, first off, like I hadn't really had a running resume at all. I've never actually ran an official race. Like my first official race is next month. I have a 50K down outside of Seattle.
Yeah.
So it was kind of tough to get, you know, funding or sponsors, because it's like, oh, like, yeah, you're gonna run across Canada in under 150 days. It's like, where's your resume, dude?
Yeah.
So I'm very fortunate to have, you know, a company like A6 Canada just be completely on board and be there the whole, like, they're, you know, just even, how are you doing, Sky? You know, they genuinely cared. So that was nice, and that made it a lot easier. Mm-hmm. But even looking back in hindsight, like, it's hard to have people commit to 4 or 5 months of their life.
For sure.
I didn't have the funding to pay them. Like, it was all volunteer. So phenomenal job by everyone involved to help me get across from coast to coast, and doing so on just from, you know, because they want to. Yeah. I would have loved to have, you know, 3 or 4 people on board. I would have loved to have a content creation crew. Like, it's a shame. I'm kicking myself for not having, like having someone run my social media, it, you know, even having a YouTube channel for that would have been sweet, or having a documentary made. But we'll have a lot of future projects
for sure
that I'll have that. And I that's probably the biggest thing I learned, is to prioritize the content creation, especially in today's world, because that really brings out more awareness, really. Yeah.
And I'm curious to ask, without that running resume, like you talked about, I hadn't thought about that with sponsorship, and it sounds like you ended up with some amazing sponsors that really cared, and that goes a long way. But I'm curious, when you were first starting out to try and reach out to these guys, and they're saying, well, where's your resume? Did that fire you up of just just because you clearly have that self-belief in yourself, to hear people, you know, kind of not doubt it, but just say like, well, where's the proof? Did that give you any extra fire, or was that just, cause I imagine for myself, if I was putting myself in that position, that would be a little bit of like, oh, just wait and see. Like, you're going to wish you sponsored me, because I'm going to do this, and it's going to be such an amazing thing that you would have wished you got on board.
Yeah, it definitely fired me up, especially because I knew I was going to complete it. Like, I knew I was, but it all worked out. Like, I'm glad you know, any companies that were interested or reached out and kind of rescinded their offer, whatever it was. Like, I ended up with the 3 companies I needed to be with to get across the country. A6 Canada, and 6 supplements out of Okotoks, and North Wellness CBD out of BC. All 3 companies are, you know, they were family. They weren't, I didn't look at them as sponsors. They were truly family. And I plan on staying with them forever, because they gave me the belief, and then having their belief gave me more belief in myself. So worked out exactly how I wanted it to. And now I can look back, and it's like, okay, you did this cross Canada run pretty much bare bones. Every other project in the future will just be easier.
For sure. Yeah. It's kind of beautiful how it works out like that, and the way that the sponsors came on, like you talked about, that their family, that they care about, and what that gives you is so much more than, you know, a dollar amount that they could give to you. That support and that belief is way more than any dollar amount. You can't put a dollar amount on that. That's awesome. Another thing I've been really curious to ask you about is just the people along the way. I'm sure you met some amazing people. I mean, obviously with COVID, it takes away a little bit of probably what the aspect would be if it was in a different time, but I'm sure along the way, you met some really amazing people that helped out and got to see, you know, coming from Alberta, you got to see every inch of this country, almost, maybe just the territories. Maybe that'll be another run at another time in the summer, hopefully. But just who stood up for you as some people on the way that really shaped the trip and shaped the run for you?
Oh man, every single province had amazing people. Like, we know Canadians are amazing people, and then you actually go coast to coast and you realize, like, we're all the same. Like, you hear, like, you know, division between the East and West and this and that. Like, 99% of people are great people.
Yeah.
And so the first thing that really stood out was the morning after I had that mountain lion interaction. I was in the middle of nowhere with no service.
Yeah.
And so I was starting the next morning terrified.
Right.
And so I was running down this mountain pass at about a 22-kilometer downhill run into Castlegar, BC.
Yeah.
And right when 5 minutes into my run, I saw this other couple. They had drove their car up to the top of the mountain pass, and they were going to run down to Castlegar. And I later found out they were training for a run. Yeah. So I hopped on over to the other side of the highway and asked if I could run with them, and kind of explained my situation. And that was super nice. And then after the run, they let me shower in their house. They got me like chocolate milk, which is like, if you guys don't know, it's like the best recovery drink.
Yeah.
And they donated, and, you know, we got to chat with them. Their 9-year-old Ireland's ran like a 10K already. Like, it's incredible. She wants to do like a marathon, and it was cool. That got me fired up. And then I had friends come from Alberta to come run with me near like Cranbrook. Yeah. They ran me across the Alberta border. Saskatchewan was amazing. We had people in Regina run with me, take me out for dinner. Winnipeg, same thing. Winnipeg's running community is incredible. There's a phenomenal guy named Juno out of Winnipeg, and he's a husband and a father, and he just did on Boxing Day, he calls it running day, which is hilarious. He did 48 hours straight of running to raise funds and and donations for the homeless shelter.
Wow.
And he did that in like minus 20 degrees or something. So that was incredible. I got to meet him. Thunder Bay was great. Sault Ste. Marie was great. Ottawa was great, which is where I met my girlfriend.
Yeah.
Everywhere, Quebec, New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, Newfoundland is just, we're so lucky to be from Canada, honestly.
Yeah. And I think we all know that at some level, but just something like that experience really highlights it for you and really brings that right to the top, and you get to see it firsthand. That's awesome. And I don't know if you want to talk with the cougar. I feel like the listeners are probably, what cougar? What are you talking about, cougar? I don't know if you want to maybe tell that story. Like I told you, I'd listened to that podcast, so I got to hear it. And it seems like every big time runner I come on has some sort of animal experience to tell you about. Actually, Phil, who I told you about that I had on the podcast, he had a pretty crazy grizzly bear experience with a run group that they were with, and it was mind blowing. So I think that's par for the course here. And I think you actually mentioned some other animal instances that you guys didn't dive into. So I don't know if you want to maybe tell another story or let people in on that one.
Yeah, I mean, we had it all. We had like every animal in Canada. But yeah, I'll start with the grizzly, or not the grizzly, the cougar encounter. That's like my biggest fear. Like people are like, what are you most concerned about? Like before you start your Canada run, or what? I'm like a mountain lion encounter. Like, I do not ever want to have to come in contact with that. Yeah. So it was day 10, southern BC. I started that day at like Christina Lake, and we're ending just before Castlegar. So I basically started up this mountain pass, and right when you started, it says like there's no cell service and there's like no gas station for the next however many kilometers. Like it was probably the most wilderness patch on the Canada run. Yeah. And so I made a plan with my team, because I knew we couldn't contact each other through cell phone. And we said, okay, let's have lunch in an hour. I'll meet you guys, 8-10 kilometers down the road, wherever has like the best available turnoff. Yeah. I'll just be prepared to see you guys at around 8 or 10K. And sure, good to go. Started on my way. And then after 10 or 11K, I was like, this is kind of weird. Like, where are they? Yeah. So I started like waiting for them, and no one was coming. And I was like, maybe they're waiting for me. So I just kept on going on my way. And then after another hour, I was like, okay, something's up. Yeah. Probably have a dead battery. And as time kind of went along, my thoughts were getting worse. I was like, maybe my dog got out and they're looking for him. Right. So like, oh shoot, like I might have to spend the night here. Like I'm wearing shorts and a t-shirt. I have pistachios, and I guess I have like mountain water. There's streams everywhere. So I went and filled up a couple of my water bottles at a stream. And as I was filling them up, I just felt this presence, and I heard this big like sniff, and I just like the hairs on the back of my neck just shot up. So I got out onto the middle of the road, and I was like, am I maybe just super heat stroke? Like is my mind playing games on me? I kept walking, and it was just it was super eerie. Like there's no traffic, it's super quiet. And I still felt that presence. Another, like, I don't know, a good amount of time. And then I finally saw the RV again. And Chris and Shayla were like, dude, what the heck? Like, we were looking for you, we're waiting for you. I'm like, same here. Like, I don't know how I miss a 34-foot RV. Yeah. So that was weird. And I was like, okay, like, let's have dinner quick. But like, I think I'm being followed by something. So like, stay close. Like, you guys can it's quiet, just even tail me. Yeah. And finished dinner, went out on like the last couple kilometers. I just remember it being like a beautiful pink sunset. Yeah. In this beautiful mountain pass. And about a kilometer down the road, this couple actually pulled over. And rightfully so. I mean, I would have done the same. It was like 8 or 9 o'clock at night. And they're like, are you okay? And I'm like, yeah. Like, I explained what I was doing and everything. And it was like probably a 45-second interaction. And then along I went. But that interaction is super important, because that when the cougar eventually hopped up onto the guardrail, if that interaction with that older couple didn't happen, I would have been further down the road, and the mountain lion would have got me from behind. Yeah. So it hopped up, and now I had my bear spray in my hand this entire time, because I felt that feeling. And wow. I had the safety off, and thank God. I wish I had a GoPro on this run. Yeah. Because that would have gone viral. This cat was 6 to 8 feet away from me, mouth wide open, ready to pounce, and shot it. Big curtain of spray. Yeah. And it jumped off the guardrail, and I was expecting for it to come back. Yeah. But then my mind took over, and I just sprinted downhill back to the RV, which was thankfully like a couple hundred, like 100 meters or 200 meters away. And I just hopped in there, and all the adrenaline I just started crying. I was like, holy shit. Like, I almost just died. Like, that was, if I didn't have the bear spray, even if I had the bear spray in the side of my backpack, it would have been too late. So that was terrifying. And I just wanted to call my parents and be like, oh my God, like, this just happened. And I had no cell service. So I was kind of trapped in that emotion until that next morning, when I got to run with my friends from Castlegar.
Wow. And I just can't imagine that, because an experience that powerful would probably, take, in normal circumstances, it'd take you weeks to fully process that, and to know that you have to get back into it and you got to start running the next day, or not have to, but that for what you want to do, you have to. And I just can't imagine what that would be to try and process that overnight, and then to get in there. And like you said, the couple from Castlegar, that was probably a godsend for what you needed in that moment, and that helped you get to that point. And also, I just think it's amazing what those thousands of years of evolution do to give you that instinct to feel that you're being watched. Like, that is just people need to understand how important that is, to listen to those things, because 9 times out of 10 you're going to be right. We don't know why we know this, but that's it's important. Holy man, that is terrifying. And I'm just trying to process, put myself in your shoes of what I would feel in that moment. And then probably the rest of the trip, were you a little bit more on edge, or was it, a couple of days of that, and then you kind of settled in once you got to some more, familiar Alberta territory where you knew a little bit more of the wildlife there? Did it ever fall off, or was that the rest of the trip? Did you have that kind of in the back of your mind?
I was on edge until I got to Pincher Creek. Yeah. Like Alberta, like once like the mountains were gone. Mm-hmm. That was pretty scary. And then getting into northern Ontario, around all the way from Kenora to Sault Ste. Marie is, or even Sudbury, there's a lot of wolves. So I saw 3 wolves in like 2 days. Wow. It wasn't anything like the mountain lion, but it was probably like 4 or 5 in the afternoon, and I run against traffic on the shoulder so I can see. Yeah. And so I saw this, I thought it was a little black bear, because I saw a bunch of those on the run, and they never did anything. Yeah. I saw it walking across the highway, And so I'm seeing its side profile, and it was very, very tall. Like I knew it wasn't a dog or anything like that. It was very tall. And then once it crossed the road and then turned and started walking towards me, I was probably like half a kilometer away. So like I wasn't too scared. And like I said, it was like 4 or 5 in the afternoon. There's a good amount of traffic. But when it turned to me and I saw the front profile, I could see how like it was pretty skinny, but it was very tall. And that sounded like, that's a wolf.
Yeah.
So I crossed onto the other side of the highway. I could tell the wolf was looking at me, but there was enough semis that kind of scared it off into the ditch. But when it went in the ditch, it was like, oh, here we are back into like the I'm being followed situation with the mountain lion. And it's funny because I meant to call Garrett, my driver, to be like, hey, like I don't have any bear spray on me. Can you like come back? The wolf, but I accidentally called my grandmother, and I don't know how I didn't give her a heart attack. And so that put her on edge, I think, for the rest of the run. But I saw lots of bears and never did anything. I didn't see any grizzlies, just little brown and black bears. But yeah, you realize that really, if you just, apart from the mountain lion, if you just leave them alone, like there's bigger things to be scared of in this country.
For sure. Had you seen a wolf before, or was that your first time?
I saw one once in my life. I was driving back from Radium Hot Springs on Highway 93. And saw a big wolf cross the road. I was in my car, like 8 a.m, and they're scary. Like they just stare into your soul, and you're like, yeah, you would kill me. Like I wouldn't have a chance. So yeah, I'd like to avoid them as much as possible. But man, they're beautiful, and you just can't help but just like watch them like walk and just they're beautiful creatures.
And living up in Slave Lake, Alberta, right? Like you see them not regularly, but it's not uncommon. And I find it so funny that almost everyone you run into either says, oh, I've seen a wolf before. And then how regularly you hear this story of, oh, I thought I'd seen a wolf before, but I just saw my first one and I've never seen a wolf before. Like, because when you see one, you recognize it. Like people might, if you've never seen one, you might mistake a dog for it. But once you've seen one, you'll never mistake a dog for a wolf, right? Like it's a different feeling. Yeah. And if you get close enough to, like see the look in their eyes and that, it's a different experience for sure. That is pretty wild. And then kind of sticking with the animal theme here, you had a beautiful dog that came along the trip with you. And how old was your dog when you went on the trip? And how amazing was that? It seemed like, just from the social media posts that I got to follow along, it seemed like he or she was a pretty big part of the mental health aspect of the trip, and having that buddy that's always there for you, and nothing better than a dog for that role.
Oh, exactly. I mean, you just said it. Like you can have the worst day, or there could be something shitty that happened, and you get back into the RV, and Duke, my Dalmatian, he does this smile where he shows all his teeth and wags his tail, and it's like you can't be pissed off. Like and you just get to snuggle with him all night, and he's amazing. And I've had Duke since I was 18, and when I got him, I was like 220 pounds. Like I was just out of high school. I was doing partying and drinking and not exercising, and my mental health wasn't really great then either. And I got Duke. I don't know why. Like I was looking for a job on Kijiji and ended up getting a dog instead. My parents loved that because I was still with them. I bet. And my parents are like, "This is your dog. You got to be responsible for him." And I couldn't go partying or drinking on Friday, Saturday nights. I gotta stay home with my puppy because everyone who's had a puppy knows how much work they are.
I sure do.
And then a Dalmatian, especially, I didn't realize this, is like they're so energetic. They're cousins with the Greyhound, so they just need to run. And the dog parks weren't doing anything, so I would make the 2-hour drive to the mountains. I grew up in Red Deer, and so I'd drive to the mountains, and we go do a hike that was anywhere from like 3 to 7 hours, and drive back, and he'd sleep the whole way home. He'd be tired the whole next day. And I was like, this is awesome. And this hiking is doing a lot for my mental health. So it was great. Duke was happy. I was happy. And Duke's in a big way, he's responsible for my kind of change in life, like committing myself to being healthier, and got me into running. So I had to keep up with him. And like he's done like 25 half marathons. He's climbed 55 different mountains. Like he's got quite a resume.
Yeah. Talk about that run resume. He could probably get a couple sponsors.
Yeah. And so he inspires me. And then, I mean, he's a dog obviously, but just like seeing their positive attitude every single day is amazing. So Duke was a huge part of the run. Unfortunately, he didn't get to run a lot because it was such a hot summer.
Yeah.
Record-breaking heat. So his paws on that asphalt, even with little booties, it would just melt them. Yeah. And then when it did get cooler, it was hard because I ran on the Trans-Canada mostly. So he's, semis driving by. First of all, I'm just like super protective and probably like any parent would, just super scared. And but any chance that we could take like an off-road detour, even if it was an extra kilometer or two, we would get him out on that. So out of the 7,200 kilometers, Duke maybe did 100 kilometers.
Yeah. I'm sure he wanted to do all 72 with you, but yeah, gotta keep him safe. Gotta keep him safe. Oh, that's awesome. And you mentioned that heat, and that is, one of those things where being in Northern Alberta and a runner, you're usually battling the cold, but then, I spend my summers out in BC and Penticton, and some of those days trying to run those hills in that heat, it is next level. And that's doing, 5 to 10 kilometers and you're back. Like, you can kind of get away with it if you bring a couple of water bottles and it's not that bad. But when you're trying to put in, 40 to 80 kilometers in heat like that, how did you overcome that? And was that something, did it surprise you how tough that was, or were you pretty mentally prepared for that going in?
Oh man, it was hard. BC, thankfully, with all that elevation, was pretty good weather. It was still over 20 degrees, but once I got to Southern Alberta, that's when and into Saskatchewan and Manitoba, it was anywhere between 35 and 40 degrees. So basically my plan at that point was, we'll have the RV go like every 3-4 kilometers. But the issue was, with it being 34 feet, is there's not always that option. Right. And also with the RV being, it was 24 years old and huge, like the stopping and going in that heat is horrible for it. So the RV didn't do real good. And even when you're taking water with you, within a minute, like that water bottle is warm. So it was just grinded out. I don't know. Thankfully, like, it was kind of still at the beginning of the Canada run where I was, really, really, really motivated. I mean, I was motivated the whole time, but like it would have been a lot tougher nearing the end if it was that hot. But man, that was crazy. There's the one point where the RV broke. Basically what happened is I did like my first half of the mileage that day. And then we found that there was an RV park like 20 kilometers down, 20 K down. So the plan was to go and secure a spot for the day. So we ended the run, marked the spot, drove to the RV park, and the plan was just to like plug in the AC and cool down for the hot hours of the day. And then Garrett would drive me back in the evening to where I ended off, and then I could continue. So when we got to the RV park and then went to start the RV when it was time to go back, and it wouldn't start. So I'm just super stubborn. I'm pissed off with just like, it was so hard to get a rhythm going. It just seemed like it was one step forward, 2 steps back. So I was like, fuck it. Like, I'm going to run back 20 kilometers to where we ended off. Those are dead kilometers. They don't count. And then once I get to that point, then I can start my watch again and run back to the RV. And that sucked. Like,
the mental toll that would take. I can't even imagine.
I was just pissed off, and like the bugs were like the worst they'd been on the whole run, and just so mad at that RV. But that's, and then just like anything, like those shitty times you're grateful for them later down the road, literally, because late other times during the Canada run, I could remember that and push through any like other obstacles. But yeah, that heat was the toughest part of the Canada run for sure. Yeah, I bet.
And as much as it sucks, it teaches lots of lessons. And that was kind of I was probably going to hold this question to the end, but I mean, it's a nice time for it here. But one of the things I loved asking Phil when he was on, because I had him on a couple times before his 200-mile race, but he had done some, and we were talking about the races, and we were discussing kind of what he learned for himself, and like how he changed it and what lessons he learned over the run. And I had him on pretty recently after the 200-miler, and he was still trying to digest it. And now, since you've had a couple months since the run, what do you think the biggest things that you learned, and how do you think you changed as a person over that 4 months and over all those kilometers?
biggest thing I learned is like when you choose to have a positive mindset when all these shitty things happen, like that's when you resolve them and things get better. When these shitty things happen and you decide it's super easy to be pissed off and mad and negative, but then you're just digging a deeper hole for yourself. So choosing positivity during, really tough times will get you out of it a lot quicker than dwelling on it.
Yeah. And that's such an important lesson. And it's very easy to say, and it's so tough to do in those moments. But I think having examples where you can feel it work and you can see it work, where you're choosing that and seeing it get you out of it. And everyone's has tons of times in their past where they've done the wrong thing and maybe made the situation worse. You always have that in your back pocket, but to get to see those two things side by side, it really drives home that message. And I think for everybody to, it's a good lesson to try it once in a while, just even if things are going to hell in a handbasket, just to try and force that positivity in there and watch the results. You'll get to see that point proven to you. I know it sounds like a cliche, but anybody can try it and anyone can feel that. And that's a great lesson to take out of it. And that's awesome. And the other thing that I learned from Phil was, because I thought when I asked him about this 200-mile race and these big races that he's done, I was trying to ask him about this amazing feeling that I was sure he would have had at the end of it. And what he told me was that, and apparently he said that this is quite common with running. So I'm curious to ask you about it, but he said it was almost a disappointment to finish, and like almost was a sad feeling because of how much you put in and how much of your identity gets put into being that person that's doing this race. And then once it finishes, you're kind of left a little bit empty and without that next thing. And I'm curious, when you finally did finish, what was that feeling like? Was it that ecstasy of accomplishing that, or was it a little bit down to lose that piece of who you were for so many months?
It was sad. Like it was really sad, actually. I remember finishing in St. John's, and I was like, what do I do? Like, do I go back to the RV and start recovering for tomorrow's run?
Yeah.
Like, it's only 3 p.m. Like, I still have like 6-7 hours of running to do. Like, and you realize it's all done. I actually went straight to the hotel, and my friends and family celebrated, but I just stayed in the hotel room that night. And it was really, really sad. And because I just had so much fun on the run. Obviously there was tough times, but like this run was like the most fun I've ever had in my life. Like it was super cool. And like, I already know I want to do it again, and maybe a couple times. And but that finish line, like when you're doing something like this, like you have a lot of small wins along the way. And if you're someone who likes to set goals, like I'm setting goals, future goals halfway through this run, and I'm starting to kind of mentally prep for this. It's like, oh, this would be a cool, like try to go do like a fastest known time on this trail. And like I think David Goggins says that there's no finish lines in life. So it was nice to be done. I got to rest. I didn't mind sleeping in a nice comfy bed for a few days. And not having to get up at 6 or 7 in the morning and being completely sore. Like those were nice things, but it probably took a couple weeks before I would wake up in the morning and be like, oh my God, like what time is it? Like I got to get going. And it took a couple weeks to kind of go back to normal.
For sure.
So,
it's amazing how much the body and the mind adapts to what you're doing. And I think you can apply that to running, or you can apply it to anything, but it's amazing how pliable we are and how much the body will snap into that if you force it to. It takes a lot of work and a lot of mental pressure and a lot of physical ability to get there, but it will in the end. You mentioned David Goggins, and he's such an inspiration to so many people. He's just, he's the almost, if you look up inspiration in the dictionary, his face is probably right beside it. And I'm just curious, who else, do you have any other, kind of guys like that really inspire you, that you look up to in maybe in the running space, or maybe in something completely different?
Iron Cowboy, James Lawrence. I did 100 Ironmans in 100 consecutive days. He's from Calgary, but he's been living in Utah for like his wife's American, and he has a family down there and everything. But I got to speak with him right when the pandemic was starting in 2020, like March, April. And I just asked him if he wanted to come on my Instagram and do a live segment to kind of get some positivity out there, because everyone was just kind of staying at home and didn't know what was going on. And to know that someone, because I was living in Red Deer, and to know that someone just an hour and a half down the road is capable of greatness like this.
Yeah.
It's like I have access to all their resources that they had access to. Like there's no excuses. Like I can totally do this.
For sure.
And he fired me up. And then Dave Proctor, he's an ultra runner based out of Calgary. We're going to get actually out on a run hopefully next week before I get to Ecuador. He's going to set out to do the Cross Canada speed record. So
wow.
I did it in 143 days. Dave's going to try to do it in under 70 days.
Holy crap. He's going to need a good RV. That's what I'm saying. No 24-year-old RV.
I offered to crew him, to help him any way I can. He attempted a couple years ago. He had some sort of, he got injured outside of Winnipeg. So he got a good chunk in, but then now he's recouped and gotten stronger, and his mind's gotten stronger. Last year he ran 100 miles in 15 hours. Like that's a 5:45 pace.
That's crazy.
100 self-supported too.
Yeah. Nuts.
So yeah, he's an inspiration, and I'm just grateful that he's willing to help me out, give me tips and stuff like that, because he's the best ultra runner in Canada, in my opinion. So
yeah, and it's so cool to kind of see this. If you would have asked me about ultra running, say 4 or 5 years ago, I wouldn't even know what it was or what it existed. It's crazy how much it's come on the map with guys like Goggins and Cam Hanes and guys like that are really tell the story of what it is and kind of inspire people. It seems like it's really gotten into the cultural zeitgeist that people are aware of what it is. And I'm curious to see where that's going to take it in the future, because it seemed like for so long it was this crazy niche thing that if you knew somebody, you might know about it, but if you didn't, but now it's getting pretty popular. That's kind of interesting for me to see where it's going to go, because that always adds new levels. And once more people get to hear about it, then it pushes that level and everybody's trying to compete. And another thing I'm curious about, what is the speed record for Cross Canada?
I think 72 days by Al Howie in 1970s. Wow. He has a crazy story. Everyone should look him up. Like this guy was like on the run from Interpol and then got like everything cleared. Like he ran away to Canada. He smoked like 2 packs a day and then quit it all and was like, I'm going to run across Canada. And that record hasn't been touched since. He's doing like 104 kilometers a day or something.
Holy crap. People built different back then, I think too, but not really. Cause everyone builds upon the next and stand on the shoulders of giants. So I'm sure that record will be broken maybe sometime soon. Maybe it'll be you, who knows? And then that kind of leads me to, now that you've had a little bit of time since that last run ended, do you know what your next thing is? Or are you still kind of got a couple in mind that you think is going to be the next one? Or do you are you starting to zero in on what you think your next journey is going to be?
A lot of big, a lot of goals and ideas kind of floating out. I just have to kind of commit to them. I have that 50K down in outside Seattle next month. I'd love to push for a first place finish in that. Yeah. I want to qualify for Boston this year. So anyone that doesn't know about the Boston, everyone knows about the Boston Marathon, but to qualify for it, for my gender and my age group, I have to run it in under 3 hours, which would be like a 4 minute and 6 second kilometer pace for 42K. So I'm working on that right now. And then I'd love to get out and try to do the fastest known time on the East Coast Trail with my girlfriend. She's a great runner as well. She qualified for Boston this year. And it's a 230 kilometer trail. And we're going to try to do it in under 35 hours. Wow. Newfoundland was beautiful. That's why I want to go back out there. It's just stunning. It's got to get out there. But yeah, those are kind of like my goals for 2022. I want to be the first North American to run around the globe. Wow. I know so much planning needs to go into that. Essentially that goal is 4 times the distance and 4 times the time as it took for the Canada run. I've had that in the back of my mind before the Canada run. So I kind of used the Canada run as a pilot project to see if I could even, if I'm just way in over my head. 5 people have ran around the globe, but no one from North America. So I'd love to do that in the next few years, maybe before I'm 30. Yeah. And aside from that, that's pretty much it. I just want to race. run. It just, the ultra running community is phenomenal. And I see it so similar to like Formula One racing. Like I'm the runner and I have to have my team helps me finish better.
For sure.
You'd laugh if you saw an F1 car with no crew and like the driver getting out of the car and changing his tires and everything like that. So it's such a team sport, even though there's just the one runner. So to kind of get to dive into that community, and even if you're running, like the people running the race, they're your competition, but they're also there to like cheer you on and keep you going. The camaraderie is amazing in the ultra scene. So I'm just really excited to get into that.
That's awesome. And to hear all those different goals that you have, it seems to me like they're very different. I'm wondering for you, do you just love running? Because I feel like training for like marathon and marathon times versus long distance kind of trailish stuff I would guess would be very different. Do you have like a preference between what you enjoy, or do you want to get it all? Is that kind of your thing? And then in terms of training, do you have to think about that and kind of like what you're putting in for kind of what you got coming up? Because I would imagine you'd have to train very different for those things. Sorry.
Yeah. I was just talking with my girlfriend about that. I want to get like the Boston just qualifying done. Like, I think that's just like a bucket list thing.
Yeah.
But my focus is on ultra. So for people that are listening that don't know what ultra is, it's by definition, it's just anything longer than a traditional 42.2 kilometer marathon.
Right.
So typically races will start at 50K. They go up to 50 milers. So 80K, 100K, 100 milers. Now we're seeing like 200 milers, 250 milers. So I want to like long distance. Like I'd love to be winning 100-mile races.
Yeah.
That's my goal. And what's super cool too about ultra, I think it's worth mentioning, is like men and women are equal playing field, because it gets to a certain point where it's not physical. It is all mental. And it's really cool to see. And it's almost like the longer the races now, like the women are winning them. I think women can endure pain a lot better than men, honestly.
Yeah, as much as we might not want to admit it. Yeah,
I'll admit it. Courtney Dolwalter, she's an ultra runner. She did a 240-mile race. It was the Lake Tahoe 240. Yeah, and she won it, set the course record, and she beat second place by 10 hours.
That's wild.
Like no other sport. You can just put both together and it'd be an equal playing field. So I think it's awesome to see girls kicking guys' ass in these ultras. So it's a really, really fun and just a super different sport than what everyone's used to.
For sure. And like when you listen to Courtney's story, she went on Joe Rogan, and I'm sure a ton of people listening have probably heard that story, but if you haven't, go listen to it. It is spectacular. Just what she went through and the mental push. That's, like you already mentioned, that's the crazy side of, like her, like going through hallucinations and I think she had fallen at one point and cried and she couldn't see. But just at no point was there any quit. It was, doesn't matter what's in front of me or what I'm dealing with. I'm going to finish this. And I'm that type of mental strength blows me away and is so inspiring. Just like all of this is inspiring, but just to have those stories and what's amazing to me is that there's podcasts available too, because now you, not only is that inspirational for the people that know her, but now you get to spread that inspiration around the world, right? Same with Cam Hanes and David Goggins and all these guys, but it's just amazing to see it spreading around the world and not just being restricted to, the people that might be friends with them or we're making a special appearance here.
Hey,
little puppy dog. I love you. Hop up on your bed. See, then the people can see you. Yeah, good girl. I'm going to give you a big treat because you're such a good girl. Sorry about that.
The views will go up now.
Yeah, exactly. Once you get a little cute puppy in the back corner, she's being so good. She hasn't whined once. I was a little bit worried about it. Another thing I was a little curious about on this Canada run, do you listen to anything, any music, podcasts, audiobooks? Do you like to just not have it, just be alone with your thoughts? Is it a mix?
In this situation, I like to have, like music.
Yeah.
I usually like to have music. It was funny. I had like the same 6 playlists the whole time. Like looking back, it's like, why? But I just it never came to my mind to go and download a different album or whatever. And then I only started listening to podcasts on the run when I was in Newfoundland, which I was I should have done that the whole time, because you find an hour and a half, 2-hour podcast, and you just dive deep into that, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, I just finished 15 kilometers, sweet. Or you're like, oh, I don't want the podcast to end, and you're like, I'll just keep doing a couple more kilometers or whatever. It helped a lot. So there was one of the toughest 4-day stretch of the run is when I like water damaged my phone. Like, it was sitting in my pocket on my running vest right there, and all my sweat. It was so humid in Ontario. It was from Sault Ste. Marie to Sudbury. It was so humid. So my phone was water damaged. It was soaked. And I had no music for like 4 days, and it was like 40 degrees. So that was super, super tough. So then after that, I was like, I'm having my phone charged, my headphones charged. Like, I need music for the rest of this.
Yeah. Oh, it's interesting you say that about, losing yourself in podcasts. I think that's what changed it when I got into running more regularly, was when I found podcasts, and just, I used to run, but I would hate it. And it would be something that I would have to force myself to do. And I knew it was just for the results, and I wasn't actually enjoying it. But when I found podcasts, I started to enjoy running so much, because it was free time where I have a thing about efficiency. And if I'm just sitting there listening to a podcast, I feel like I'm not doing enough. I need to be doing something else. And when I could combine that, where I'm getting my exercise in, I'm getting into this running, and I'm getting to listen to these amazing stories where I'm losing myself, I started to really enjoy running. And then I would look forward to running. And when I was having a stressful day at work, and I knew that I'd have that, hour and a half of just going to the running track by my office and just doing loops and listens and just kind of losing myself in that, I really started to enjoy it. And now it's become something that, if I don't get a run in a day, it's a bad thing. And if I could have gone back to myself maybe 6 years ago and told myself that, I wouldn't have believed him. Right. And it's just, that's what brought me into it. And maybe everyone will be different, but if you can get to that point where you start to enjoy the runs, it's such a gift, and it's such an amazing thing to have in your back pocket, such an amazing tool. Right. And that's just my little personal story.
100% agree. And I think even just to touch on that, it's like anyone who might want, is like listening, like, oh, maybe I'll try that out. Like, put in the podcast, do not worry about pace or anything. Like, just, even if you want to walk, just put in a podcast, go on a walk, and just be slow. Like, there's I know I'm kind of going off here, but people that are starting to run, like, don't worry about speed. Do not worry about distance. Like, if anything, just be like, I'm going to go for an hour, go for time. Like, if you're going to go for 30 minutes, 20 minutes, an hour, and whatever you get in that hour, that's great. I think anyone that's new to running, I wouldn't push harder than a 6 out of 10 on the exertion.
Exactly.
And that's the biggest thing, is people want to go 10 out of 10 every single day. They want to be that hard runner, and that's how you're going to get burnt out, and you're also probably going to get injured. So put on a podcast, go on a nice slow run or a nice long walk, and that will be the start of, I think, a whole new obsession for almost anyone.
Yeah. And another thing I always tell people, if they're starting out, is if you're having trouble pacing yourself, just set something really easy. Like, I'm going to run for a minute, walk for 2 minutes. I'm going to, and you can set that to wherever you want with whatever kind of cardio base you have. Maybe you can do, running for 3 minutes, walking for 1, whatever it is, but just have no judgment on it. And you're probably going to find that whatever you think you can do, maybe just dial it back a little bit. Cause I remember even when I would be running in the summers, go to university for a year and drink my face off and not do any exercise, and then come back trying to jump back into it, knowing that I knew what I got to last summer, and then trying to jump back into it and realizing, oh, I'm nowhere near. I need to do like the 1 minute running, 1 minute walking, just to build that back up. And just it wouldn't have been that big of a deal if I wasn't putting the pressure on myself and the judgment of what it was. If I hadn't, it would have been just fine. And every summer I got back up to that base at the end of it, but I would judge myself so much at the start for not being where I want to be. And that's exactly what you're saying, is just take all the judgment away and just get into it. Just make sure you're doing it. And all the judgment is just going to make it worse for you. And there's no need for it. For what, I don't know, maybe it's human nature. We have a real instinct to start doing that and attaching all these other things to it, but you're just going to do yourself a disservice. Just get in there, take it easy, have fun, music, podcast, whatever it is, and just get out there. That's the biggest thing of all.
Yeah, no, and like, honestly, like, no one is judging. If you think someone's judging, no one's judging.
Yeah.
If I'm seeing someone outside running, you won't know the difference between a 7-minute pace and a 5-minute pace. Like, it looks the same. No one, you know what I mean? Like, everyone's just so hard on themselves. I used to be hard on myself too. And run for yourself and no one else. And chances are that when you are running and people are seeing you running and seeing you post, like, you're more than likely inspiring them to get out too. So it's just do it for you, and no one's judging us. So get out on that run.
Yeah, exactly. And something that I heard in the other podcast was that you were a competitive soccer player kind of growing up, and that was something that you had to give up due to concussions. And I just, because, you know, growing up with hockey and MMA, being a big fan of MMA, concussions are kind of, you know, close to my heart. And I'm just curious, was that, you know, did you have some bad wrecks, some collisions on the field? Was it a lot of just, you know, because I'm hearing a lot about just soccer players and just heading the ball in regular play is a lot of that subconcussive trauma that leads up to these concussions. And I'm curious where that got to. What was that process like? Was that hard to let go? And just kind of in the frame of mental health, because that's kind of what we're framing everything in. How was that for your mental health to go through that and have to make that decision?
Well, I mean, first off, it was tough. Yeah. Cause I played soccer from when I was like 4 years old till I was like 21 competitively. And I mean, to touch on like heading the ball, even like if someone shoots a soccer ball and it's like 60 miles an hour, like,
yeah,
and you head that's like a concussion, and that's stuff you don't really think about.
Right.
Thankfully, we've come a long ways now with concussion research and everything,
Mm-hmm.
but you go to soccer practice and, you know, clear a ball on a corner kick and you have a headache and until like you're like, that's a concussion.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I've probably had like over 15 undiagnosed concussions, but I've had like 8 diagnosed ones.
Mm-hmm.
Some collisions, like I have a scar here going up for a header and hitting someone's head, splitting it open, blacked out like a couple times, like in tackles. But the one that did the worst, we were on a road trip in Medicine Hat, Lethbridge for the weekend. I was playing for Red Deer College at the time. Mm-hmm. And I just stood up on the bus, hit my head on the overhead luggage, and I had to wear like sunglasses to class for like a month. And then I had another like same, like I think I just headed a ball or something super minor that you'd think was minor. Mm-hmm. And ACAC, which is the Alberta Collegiate like sport conference, mm-hmm. You're only allowed to have like 5 or 6. So when I signed up, when I was in like my rookie year, they asked how many concussions you had, and I lied and said 0.
Yeah.
And then I accumulated like 5 concussions in that like 3 seasons. So once I got that 5th, I wasn't allowed to play, lost my scholarship.
Wow.
And I thought like the world was ending, because I was like, this is all I know.
Yeah.
And that, like I mentioned earlier, that's Duke, my Dalmatian, is a huge help, a silver lining, because that's kind of when I was getting into the mountains.
Yeah.
So it was kind of like almost like a seamless transition a little bit, because I was able to apply like that passion I had for soccer into like trail running.
Right.
And I, you know, I never thought you could get competitive with running like you can with team sports, but you sure can, because it's ultimately any individual sport. It's, you know, same as MMA or whatever. You can't look at teammates and be like, this was your fault. Like, what the heck? Like, we would have won if like you did that right pass. Or, it's you. You got to look at yourself in the mirror every day. Right. So, I'd be super competitive, run up a mountain the next week, try to beat that time. And and then it's like you want to up the distances. It's like I do for my first 50K, then I want to do my first 100K. Yeah. It's super competitive, and I'm able to apply that same passion I had for soccer. So it's a brand new chapter now, and I'm still a huge soccer fan, but I don't play it anymore.
Mm-hmm. What's your team? Who do you follow?
I like Arsenal, based out of London.
Yeah. That's kind of the only team I know. And in university, one of my when I was in second year in Lister Hall, one of my first years was a huge Arsenal fan. So just kind of it's infectious when someone's a big fan of a team like that. It's hard not to root for him. And he'd be, you know, jumping off of couches and just losing his mind at all the games. And it was pretty fun to just live vicariously through his fandom. That was it's a pretty fun sport. The only, I think I loved soccer for a while, but that Zidane headbutt in, I don't know if it was the Olympics or what it was. Maybe
World Cup final in 2006.
Yeah, I feel like ever since I saw the way that guy went down from that headbutt, I have real trouble with soccer after that. That was the one though, the face he made going down from a headbutt to the chest.
It's frustrating. Like, I hate that too. Like,
I'm sure you do. Yeah, I think that's all the Canadians.
I know why they do it.
For sure.
I would tell people to get up off the ground, because soccer, there's such small margins in a game, like a 1-0 game or 2-0 game. And that guy who, you know, was very dramatic after that.
Yeah.
But you got Zidane, who's one of the best soccer players of all time. He got kicked out of the game.
Yeah.
He didn't get to play in extra time, and he didn't get to go in penalty shootout. And Italy capitalized on that.
Yeah, exactly.
I think it's ridiculous, but
that's the game. Unless they do something to change it, you can't really blame people for it, right? And that's more my issue, is just because in hockey, you know, if you get called for diving, it's a penalty and all that, and there's fines, but it's escalating side if you do it multiple times. So now it's taking it out of the game, but not putting it onto the players, because if you don't have that, you're almost doing a disservice to your team by not acting in that way, right? It's not on the players. It's not their fault. It's on the rule set to make it so they don't have to do that. Yeah, I completely agree with you.
So they are starting to card play, like they card players a lot now. And then you see it in the NBA and hockey even a little bit now. Like there's some stuff, not as often as soccer, of course, but they're like, oh man, like this is ridiculous.
For sure. Yeah.
I'm not that kind of player. I'll tell you, I'll yank that player off the ground, like get up. That was nothing.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, that's good to hear. I love to hear that. Another thing I really want to talk to you about, because I really loved how you talked about it on that last podcast, was something that you also mentioned you want to do in the future, which is going to schools and talking to kids about mental health and about, you know, following a dream. And something that you mentioned was just that, you know, in the past, when you would bring up a goal or a dream, like running across Canada, and the response you would get and how typical that is. And that's something that I've struggled with too, of, you know, wanting to take a big leap to chase this podcast, you know, the reaction you get, and just how important it is to counter that messaging to kids so that they know you can do anything. And just, I'm curious, is that always been something you want to do? Is that something kind of just after this run and what you put together? Is that something that a newfound passion that you want to pursue, or is that something you've always wanted to do? And maybe just a little bit more on why you want to do that and why it's important to you.
I think I've always wanted to do it. I mean, even when I was like a little kid, like I'd just be so annoyed with people projecting like their possibilities onto you. You know, it doesn't make sense to ask a school teacher on how to run across Canada and how to help you. It's like you got to talk to ultra runners or whatever. It's like instead of just like kind of being like, no, that's not a great goal. Let's find a more achievable one. It's like, well, why don't we go out of our way to like help them find like the steps to get there? Because like the kid wants to be an astronaut and you tell them they can't be. It's like, well, what do you mean? There's astronauts. Like they had to have this dream, and they probably had people tell them they can do it, but they're there. So
exactly,
instead of just like, like I said, like projecting your possibilities on people, it's like help them get there. Like, even if I don't know how to be an astronaut, but I can probably help someone find the person to talk to. Like if you want to do great things in life and really spectacular things, chances are not a lot of people have done that specific goal that you have in mind. So it's kind of hard to feel, I mean, it's easy to kind of feel lonely in these big goals. Like for me on the Canada run, like I didn't really know anyone that had done it. And, you know, I had people being like, is this the right time to do it, Skylar? Like, are you scared about getting injured? And I had to kind of take a step back and be like, hold on, like, who am I taking this advice from? That's the thing. Like, I'm so convinced that if you can think it in your head, you can do it. Like there's you already thought about it. So it's not impossible. I think going into schools and, you know, and then of course, like talking on the mental health too, to our young generation and helping them get these tools. Cause I think it's so easy to see someone that's successful and be like, they probably just have a sweet life. Like they just wake up and they have a sick day and go to bed and they just do it again the next day. And it's like, no, like whether you're Barack Obama or, you know, Wayne Gretzky or whoever, like you have bad days and they have to use their mental health tools as well to get through them. So there's no one who has a perfect life, and on top of that, everyone has some sort of mental health struggle, whether that be like, you know, having a loved one who's going through depression, like that affects you. And you should have tools on how to help them cope. Or maybe you have the depression yourself or whatever it may be. Every single person is affected. So every single person needs tools, and having those tools at a younger age makes it a lot easier. And if people think like, oh, like that's young kids, like they don't really go through that. It's like, I had a friend in grade 7 who was 12 years old that took his life. So, and I guarantee that, you know, Josh had thoughts like that before he was 12 years old.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think there's I think you can learn these tools very early on.
Yeah, for sure. And I was lucky enough that I didn't super struggle with mental health a ton in my childhood, and it's more recently, kind of in the last couple of years, has been a big struggle that I found. And one of the biggest things that I was so thankful for was a couple of years before I got into my struggles, I started listening to podcasts, and through that I got to hear people with depression, with anxiety, talk about it in a long form, and not in a little 15-minute infomercial to try and tell you the basis of it, but really in depth of how it feels. And when I started to feel depression and feel anxiety in myself, I was able to recognize it, and I didn't feel so scared and alone, because I felt like, I did for a little bit. There was a small period of time right before I started my podcast where I was just feeling off and my brain was in a fog, and it was so hard to get out of bed, and I was so scared because I didn't know what it was, and I wasn't used to feeling like this, and I didn't know. And I was listening to a podcast, and what they were describing was exactly what I was feeling. And it was so important to just that moment of recognition of, oh, this is what that is. And now, okay, this isn't some new thing. I don't have to be as scared of it. It still sucked. It didn't take it all away, but just that small bit of understanding. And that's why it's so important for people to talk about it and to be open about it, because if not, you could be that kid that's struggling, and maybe all it would have taken for them to just say, hey, you know what you're feeling right now? That's called this, and it's called this, and here's some things you can do for it. That just goes so far, even if it doesn't pull them out of it. Just to understand what it is so important. And then you can start to arm people with the tools to deal with it. And maybe I'd like to ask you, what are your biggest mental health tools that you use for yourself? I mean, we both have clearly exercise and running is something that me and you both use for mental health. But other than that, I'm curious, what are your biggest tools that you use in your daily life?
That's a good question. It's different for every person.
For sure.
So, I mean, this is a story I haven't shared with anyone, but I'm happy to.
Mm-hmm.
Last February 2021, I was ready to take my life.
Wow.
And thankfully, my dad came to Calgary, picked me up, and I self-admitted myself to the mental health unit.
Mm-hmm.
So I knew I needed these tools. I hated waking up feeling depressed. Like, it felt like a monster under my bed was taking over.
Yeah.
I didn't want to die, but I also I was just so lost. Like, it was like half of me doesn't want to die and is fighting for my life, and the other half is like, dude, just do it. And it was like fighting with a monster.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went to the mental health unit in Calgary, and I was there for 3 days, and I got to learn a lot of tools, and a lot of it's like kind of recognizing these triggers or things before it's too unmanageable, if that makes sense. So recognizing things that maybe instead of like, right when it's like you hit crisis and you're trying to deal with it, then it's like you don't have a mind that is going to logically kind of go through that. It's already almost like too late in a sense. So I've been kind of being able to recognize, like, okay, this is starting to make me feel this way.
Mm-hmm.
And now I need to do this, whether that be go on a run, whether that go and talk to a therapist.
Mm-hmm.
A big one was actually like holding an ice pack to your head when you're being overwhelmed or if you have a lot of anxiety. Holding an ice pack to your head for 20 seconds lowers your heart rate so much. And and so that's a small trick that I use to this day. But then also finding out, like, I have ADHD and I've been treated for depression my entire life, when really I haven't had any of my ADHD tended to. So as soon as I got to speak with a psychiatrist, and that's the big reason I wanted to go in there. And that's another conversation, is like how desperate you have to be in Canada to get mental health help.
Right.
You almost have to be begging for your life to get effective help.
Wow.
So I got in with a psychiatrist, and she got me on an ADHD medication, and that completely, that helped a lot too. And then continuing to talk to therapists and going on, exercising and even eating right, and talking to friends and that and all those things. But it's not a one size fits all fix.
For sure.
We all know that. And it is, when I was admitting myself to that mental health unit, I got like the last bed. Wow. And I remember there was a girl, like, I was already in my bed. I could hear like where they're admitting. And this girl was like begging for her, like she's suicidal. and she wants help, but they didn't have beds for her. And it's like, if she had all the courage to come here and ask for help, and you're going to send her home, it's like, she's not going to come back here for help now.
Yeah.
So I think about that girl a lot, and I really hope she's doing okay. But that's just one example of how many Canadians across, Canada that are, even if you want help, it's tough to get. So you can't just rely on professional doctors. There has to be, you have to have an arsenal of tools.
Yeah.
But if you can get in to see a psychiatrist or psychologist, they're great. I had no shame in going to the mental health unit. I knew I needed to get my tools from there. And I got my tools, and I tried to stay positive as best I can.
Yeah.
And then I got out, I could start applying those tools. So that's a big thing, is a big stigma against like mental health units. It's like, you break your arm, you're going to go to the doctor. So if your brain is hurt and injured, then you need to go and get it fixed. And there's no shame.
Sure. Yeah. And another important thing too, is that it's constantly evolving. I think the mistake that I made was, when I first went through my first kind of battle with depression, I gained a bunch of tools. The biggest one that for myself, like you say, everyone's different, was meditation. I found that was hugely impactful for my mental health. And it's been a crazy tool for myself in a bunch of different ways, not just mental health. I just love it in all these different ways. Breathing exercises that I found, some of the Wim Hof breathing, if I'm really in a dark place, doing a 10-minute YouTube Wim Hof breathing really brings you back. I think it's the same thing, kind of lowering your heart rate. It's physiological things that bring you down. But the mistake I made was, I got a couple tools and I thought that was going to be all I ever needed. And you're constantly evolving and learning new things and learning new stimuli, and you're going to be going through different experiences. And sometimes those tools won't always be what you need. And you might, the tool set that helps you out of it one time might not be adequate for the rest of your life. Right. And you always need to be looking for new tools and trying new things to be constantly kind of staying ahead of it, right? And being on the front edge. And like you mentioned, not letting it get to that point where it's so hard to pull back out of. And that's something that I've learned that lesson really hard recently, of letting it go way too far kind of over the holidays and just getting off the healthy eating habits, getting off the exercise, getting off, and just letting it kind of all crumble and sink you down. And then it's such a struggle to pull back out. And that's kind of what this last week has been for me, of just resetting, setting a strict bedtime, strict wake up time, strict diet, strict exercise program, and just kind of forcibly pulling myself out of it just to get me to a middle point where I can start making those tools work again, because the tools weren't working. Right. And I think that's very important for people to understand, that it's awesome. And that's great first step to go arm yourself with tools, but that's not the last step. And it's always going to be a journey, and you need to understand that. And I think, some people might not want to hear that, but it's important, because it's better than finding that out the hard way yourself and going through that disappointment of, why are these tools not working anymore? They worked once. Why are they not working anymore? I think that's very important. And, I think there's never going to be enough tools, but on the flip side of that, there's always new things coming out, and there's always new, and with the taboo kind of falling away and more people talking about it, there's going to be more access to this, and it's going to be less stigmatized. And that's really the goal of it all, right? It's great to raise money, and maybe we can transition to that after, but just the talking about it is so important, right? If you have the dollars to donate, it's a great place, and it's going to have impact. I really loved what you said on the last podcast about why you chose mental health, and obviously you have past experiences, but just about, you can donate to cancer research and all these other things. But if somebody gets cancer, it's really going to affect their mental health and everybody's mental health. If you, Alzheimer's, it's going to affect mental health. And it's just that thing that any other issue kind of ripples into that mental health world. And I just thought that was so poignant, and I'd never really thought of it that way, but that's why it's so important. And if you have the money to donate, that's great. But if not, just talking about it and being open and being there for your friends and calling that, it's always the strong friend that seems, and I see that with myself. I've always thought of myself as that guy. I never need any help. And to now these last couple of years to be on the other side of that, it is nice when people do reach out and ask how you're doing, right? With sponsors reaching out to you, I bet you that felt great to know that they cared about you and they wanted to know that you were okay. I think that's a beautiful message that more people need to hear. And maybe we can transition that right into the money that you raised. How was that part of it? How rewarding was that? Do you think you got more reward out of what you raised in the awareness for mental health, or was it more of a personal goal? Was it kind of 50-50? I'm curious where the raising money and the fundraising aspect kind of slotted in with everything else that you were experiencing during the trip.
Well, I mean, like I always had the goal to run across Canada, but it's, raising awareness for mental health is way bigger.
Yeah.
having people that reached out saying like, I helped, like seeing me crush yesterday, even though I was wrecked, help them get out of bed today, or people doing their first 5K, or people seeking help. Like that's amazing. Like that's the best feeling in the world. But then being able to partner the cross Canada run with the mental health run, like unfortunately, I don't think running a 10-kilometer run is going to raise $65,000 for mental health. So you kind of have to do something a little bit crazy. Like, a friend of mine, Bill, who was, he was the PR for Terry Fox.
Wow.
He told me, he's like, you doing these 75-kilometer days is raising more awareness than if you were doing 40-kilometer days.
Yeah.
So, I think, the more extreme you do something, the more awareness is made. So, it just worked out perfectly.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome to hear. I'm curious about maybe things that you didn't set out as goals, but opportunities that came up after, doing this run, gaining this resume, the notoriety that it brought. Did it open up any doors? Was there any cool experiences that you got to experience that you think you would never have got to if you hadn't set your mind to a goal like that and persevered through it?
Nothing like really, really crazy. I got to meet a lot of great people, and I think that's the biggest thing. I'm with the partners that I want to be with, like A6.
Yeah.
Like just having them have me in Toronto for their Christmas party is amazing. And,
that's cool.
So that's super cool, but I'm super like introverted, and I think after this Canada run did mess me up a lot mentally, just because of all the logistics and like having your, all these ups and downs and like having to worry like all the time. I'm still like kind of recovering from it. And it's almost like, I don't really want to be around, I know it might sound a bit bad, but I don't really want to be around people still. Like, so I'm like slowly taking my time. And that's where I kind of feel the pressure. It's like, how much time do I need to give myself? Because like, I have to go and do stuff. I'm really grateful for Lisa Bentley. She's like she's won like 10 or 11 Ironmans. And she with cystic fibrosis, which is phenomenal. She has a book, Lisa Bentley, check her out. And she's going to kind of help me with kind of getting like public speaking and just like being a great mentor. So, I mean, that's a huge plus that came without the Canada run. I never would have got to come in contact with her and other amazing people associated with A6. So there's a lot of like great things that have come from it. And continue, getting to be on your podcast and getting to talk about mental health. Like that's great. I probably wouldn't be on your Canada run. So I'm grateful for that. And, I think, this is, I think in a way, having the Canada run done gives me more belief in myself for future projects, and good projects will get me out there more. At the end of the day, I don't really care about like personal notoriety. It's like, let's raise more money for Canadian Mental Health Association. Mental health isn't even being talked about in Canada right now. So that's what I care about. I do not care about like personal notoriety.
Oh, that's awesome. And it's exactly what I would, if I could have picked the answer I would have heard, that's exactly what I would love to hear. So that's awesome. I'm curious to ask, I know you kind of did this on that other podcast, but when you brought up that world run, that just was so amazing to me. And I would just love for you to maybe expand on what that world run is and kind of the parameters that it falls under, because I was just so blown away that would even, it seems like such a huge goal that I can't even imagine someone would be crazy enough. And if it exists in the world, someone's crazy enough to think it up, but just to go over those parameters and to talk to you maybe a little bit about why that goal is interesting and maybe some of the things you thought about it so far. I just have a lot of questions about it, but I think for the listeners, maybe we just need to give them a little bit of background on what that is.
Yeah. I mean, like, I don't know too much about it. I haven't really gotten planning. I've just kind of gotten into like the loose route of it. So that's the biggest question is like, what is the route around the world? And the World Runners Association has deemed around the world run, you have to do a minimum of 26,000 kilometers.
Okay.
You have to run a minimum of 4 continents coast to coast.
Yeah.
And you have to complete a loop. So you have to finish where you started. So as of right now, I mean, like I said, I haven't got into any logistics yet, but the route would ideally be Vancouver to Miami.
Yeah.
And just to add on that, a lot of people are like, why Miami? Like it's 1,500 less kilometers to go to Miami than to St. John's from Vancouver. It's significantly less.
Really? Yeah. I would have thought it'd be more.
No, you would think, but no, Newfoundland is far away. Like you're almost just as close to Europe as you are to Calgary when you're in St. John's. So
really,
I'd go Vancouver to Miami. That's my North America. Fly down to the west coast of Chile, run to Brazil. That's my South America. Then I'd fly to Porto in Portugal, run across Europe above the Mediterranean Sea to the Caspian Sea. Fly down to Mumbai, India, and run to the east coast of Vietnam. That's the Asian continent. And then I'd fly down to Australia, run from Perth, and run the south coast to Sydney, and then fly to Vancouver, and then close my loop.
Wow, that is cool. And you said that 5 people have done not that exact route, but have done those qualifications before.
Yeah. So a guy from Australia. I've been 2 Australians, a guy from India, a guy from Germany, and a guy from the UK. And right now the speed record is 621 days. And that was done by a super inspiring guy from the UK. He did it self-supplied. He had like a push stroller, and he wasn't like an elite athlete or really anything. I kind of dove into his story, and he's kind of like a retired cyclist. He even said he was a little bit overweight when he started it. But that just shows like your mind is really what's the most powerful, and only you can knows what's inside your mind. So
for sure,
that's super inspiring. So 5 people, but no one from this side of the world. So if someone does it before me, then I'll be the first one to give them a round of applause. But I'd like to be the first one. It'd be kind of cool because I know like so many people will do it after, and super crazy athletes will crush my time. But that'd be kind of cool just to become like the 6th person in the world to do that.
Wow, that is crazy. And self-supplied, that blows my mind. Like just thinking of the logistics that go into a Canada run or into like the couple of some of the ultra races. But when you think about going all the way around the world and in the heat of Australia and stuff to try and do that on your own, that just blows my mind that someone would be able to do that. And I imagine something like that would be something that you'd build up to, not even the mental and physical skills of the running itself, but just in getting better at planning and logistics and stuff. I'm sure you learned amazing lessons from this Canada run in terms of logistics and what to do differently and what's important, what's not important type of thing. And probably need to do a couple different runs in between to learn that logistics side as well and keep getting better with that, so that by the time you are setting your mind to doing a run like that world run, you have all the skills that you need to make it successful. And I mean, you could probably do it right now and you'd be successful, but maybe save yourself a little bit of pain and heartache along the way if you had a few more skills in your bag for that. That just blows me away. That is crazy.
Yeah, it'd be a nightmare right now with the pandemic. I couldn't.
Oh yeah.
But the logistics would be a nightmare. I'd definitely have to give myself more than 7 months.
Yeah.
Multi years of planning for that. I just love to travel, and like I've done the math. Like, so on the Canada run, like I average like 65K a day. If I average 42K a day on the world run, then that would give me the speed record.
Wow. Is there any other specific speed records that you're kind of after, that you're eyeing up? I mean, again, this is all theoretical and what you do, but is there any other speed records that are kind of on your mind that you would maybe want to take a crack at in the future?
Yeah, like this year, like I want to do that East Coast Trail, that 250 kilometer trail in Newfoundland. I mean, it's crazy to say, but I mean, I'd love to like set the speed record on the Appalachian Trail or Pacific Crest Trail, like those main U.S. Through hiking trails. The bar's set pretty high on those big popular ones, but that's just kind of more motivation.
Yeah.
So I don't know. At the end of the day, it's like I like to just have a goal and apply myself and train for that.
Yeah.
And it gives me something to work forward to. And if I know that I put my 100% into it and I didn't achieve that fastest known time, like I'm fine with that.
For sure.
But to have these goals and have to train accordingly, like that's how you're going to find your best self. And that's how you're going to find your closest to your true potential.
For sure.
So I think you need to set a bar very, very high and be okay with not reaching it. Like it's a massive accomplishment to run across a province in Canada.
Yeah.
So if I failed miserably on this Canada run, but I knew I trained as hard as I can and I ran across BC and Alberta, that's pretty damn good still.
Yeah.
So, but if I set the bar, just I want to run across BC, it kind of sets like my ceiling. It's like, so I'd say set that ceiling damn high.
Yeah.
And if you fail a little bit, then I say fail.
Yeah.
But if you don't reach your goal, you're still accomplishing incredible things. So
yeah, I really love that, just personally, because I feel like with this podcast, when, you know, I don't know how much I probably talked about it on the podcast, but just in private, when I talk to people and they, well, what are your goals? And, you know, it's like, yeah, I want to be the biggest podcast in the world. I want to, you know, dwarf Joe Rogan. That's what I want to do, because, you know, and exactly that. If that never happened and I just had a successful local Edmonton podcast that when people came through, it was something that was known around here, I'd be blown away. I'd be so happy with that. But why make that the goal when you can shoot for the stars, right? And it's not just that. I have all these other crazy ideas around it that I want to build off of the podcast too, but it's just setting that bar really, really high. Like you say, then there's no failure. You're kind of taking failure off the table if you just keep at it, and you don't, the only way you can fail is to quit and to give up. And that is scary for a lot of people, I think, because then you can't blame anyone else when you set the parameters in that way. You have no one else to blame but yourself. But it's also where you can find the most of your potential and you can really reach what's truly inside of you, right? And I think that's very clear with something like those crazy runs you're doing. But even if that isn't your thing, whatever it is that you do, if you apply that kind of mindset towards it, you're going to have better results and you're going to feel better about it, and you're not going to be as, you know, self-conscious and beating yourself up about the little things when you're focused on a really big picture goal like that.
Yeah. And there's no such thing as dreaming too big. There's
exactly
such thing.
Exactly. I've kept you pretty long here. I want to let you enjoy your last day before you fly back to this beautiful, beautiful province of Alberta. I just kind of have one last question. I think it's gonna be really hard to answer. It'd probably stretch your brain, so I can probably vamp a little bit to give you some time. But I'm curious, what would the funniest thing that you experienced on the run, if it was, you know, slipping in a puddle in front of the RV, or just you know, sometimes it's the silliest thing. It's cracking a fart. I'm curious if you can cast your mind back to that run and see where you think the funniest time was.
Oh man. Yeah, there was a lot of funny stuff. I think, well, Garrett was really, really funny.
Yeah. He was the driver for the first.
Yeah, he drove for 70. Yeah, Garrett drove for 70 days. So
holy shit. That's impressive too.
And yeah, super impressive. And every time we get to like a monument of some sort, like that massive loonie in Ontario, or like anything, like he would go and like pull his pants down and twerk on it. So like I was watching like an A&W commercial the other day, and they had that giant loony. I'm like, like pictures Garrett's ass. That was funny. And I think like when I had to empty the septic tank, that was the thing too. I had to empty the septic tank. The first one, it basically was like that scene out of RV with Robin Williams. Like it was an absolute disaster. I was not laughing at the time. Yeah. But now it's like, it's hilarious.
Oh man.
Those have got to be the funniest. Oh, funny thing now too. So when I was in Ottawa, my aunt lives here, and her and my uncle drove me back to like where I left off my run, which is like 50 kilometers out of Ontario. Yeah. They gave Garrett the rest day. We didn't have to use the RV. So it was really nice of them. So they picked me up at like 4 a.m. in Ottawa, and we get to the starting line for that day. And I packed 2 left-footed shoes. So we had to drive back to Ottawa. It was like an hour back. Yeah. And then get my shoes and then drive. So it was like we wasted 2 hours, but I felt so bad that I basically just ran as fast as I could that whole day. It was our fastest day on the run. But yeah, that's pretty funny. It's like packing 2 left shoes. And like,
I could just imagine the moment you realize what you did. It's just like, oh no, you don't even want to tell them what you did.
I don't want to tell them, but they're going to be like, why aren't you running? It's like, I have 2 left shoes. So,
just try and do it barefoot. Oh man, that's awesome. Well, I had such a great time talking to you. It's such an inspiration to me. I love the why you did it. I love what you did. I love the goals that you're setting and the things around it, talking to kids, trying to spread that message. It's all so many things that are really near and dear to my heart. And I found it funny with this podcast, just how things seem to work out, and just randomly seeing on social media what you were doing, and just reaching out, not knowing you from Adam, not knowing where you're from, and then
to listen to your story a little bit on the podcast and to realize, we grew up in the same province. We have so many shared interests in so many different ways. It was just, it was almost like it was meant to be that we're going to have this conversation. And I hope that with all the things you do in the future, we can always come back and talk about it here and maybe do this in person one of these days if COVID's in a better place, and maybe do some things like that. Maybe even get a couple kilometers in. We might have to do a little bit of a baby run for you, but I could probably, maybe stretch it out to 15. Yeah. Try and do something like that. But
that'd be awesome. And I was actually born in Grand Prairie, and my grandparents
really
Wabasca. So they actually right down the road. I've spent lots of time in Slave Lake, and
we're practically cousins.
Practically cousins. Yeah. Small world. So, I'd love to link up, and hopefully we can do another show. I'll try to find some worthy. I'll try to make some worthy goals to bring to the show to talk about. So.
10-4 and all, and you'll hold me to it, because I better be doing impressive things too to make it to warrant you coming back. You'll be on Joe Rogan next. I'll have to keep growing my show to keep you coming back. So that's awesome. I can't wait for it. Thanks once again for coming on. Really enjoyed this conversation, and thanks for everything that you do. It's a real inspiration. Can't wait to do it again soon.
My pleasure. Anytime.
All right. Talk to you soon. See ya.
All right. I'm just going to apologize for the intro if there's a big buzzing sound. I just heard it in my headphones as I go to record the outro, and I couldn't figure out how to get it to go bye-bye. So if it is there, I apologize. Hopefully the magic mastering that I pay $4 a month for on Buzzsprout, my hosting service, takes care of that in the post. But we'll find out. I hope you guys enjoyed that episode. I hope you got to hear a little bit of what I was talking about in the intro with just what a special human being Skylar is, and what a special cause mental health is, and how important it is. I really love how Skylar talked about it, and how wide affecting mental health is, and how wonderful it is to see the push and the taboo kind of falling away, but it's just not fast enough, and everything you can do to push that to a place where we're understanding it and treating it the way it needs to be treated at a faster pace is just awesome, right? We cannot come far enough, fast enough, in my opinion. And I think in a lot of people's opinions, and I don't even think it's opinion. I think that's almost just fact at this point. So hope you enjoyed. If you did, please reach out to Skylar, let him know you enjoyed it. That's always a really big help for this podcast. It helps guests want to come back on. It's something to show bigger guests in the future that there is some worth to this podcast for them as well, and that they're going to get something out of it other than just a great conversation with me. You know what I mean? So if you guys could do me that favor, that'd be awesome. Other than that, just the same old things I always mention: follow, subscribe, click the like button, all those fancy social media things that are ruining the world. Oh my goodness. It's so funny. Life's funny. I hope you have a great week. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope you pass it on to a friend. I hope you win the lottery. I hope you don't step on a Lego. I hope you get outside. I hope you see some fun people you haven't seen in a while. I hope you take your vitamins. I hope you take your vitamin D. I hope you exercise. All those things. Yeah. I don't know. I'm just in a good mood for once, and I hope you guys can hear that in my voice. Not for once. I shouldn't say that. I've been feeling a lot better lately, and I just, I like to talk when I feel good. And that's the tough thing, is I don't like to talk when I don't feel good. And that's what's been such a pain of trying to record these intros and outros when I wasn't feeling too good for a while there, because it felt like a chore. And doing it today, it doesn't feel like a chore. It feels like I don't want to shut the hell up, and I just want to keep talking to you guys. Maybe it's almost time to do a solo episode one of these days. So lots of exciting things to come. All right. Okay. I've rambled for long enough. Bye.